Among other things, Reid just had his knee replaced, like yesterday morning. No, I'm not kidding. It just feels like it. And we appreciate you powering through and being here.
I appreciate you inviting me. I was going to tell everybody that's been to some of these, my limp is because I was fighting a bear.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, you got to fight a bear or something to be on the Toolbox platform.
Yeah,
so
I laughed when Tom called me. I said, well, let's see, I haven't pitched at Yankee Stadium. I haven't walked out at the mound with Derek Jeter to take Mariano Rivera out of the game. I haven't wrestled a bear. I haven't turned over on the mob. I haven't won a wire. I'm not sure why you want it.
Haven't lost $2 billion.
I have two high school teammates. They're like, what are you going to talk about?
That's good. Well, that's a good way to start. So why don't we just start by, what I said just a minute ago is I really do feel like Toolbox, like part of what makes it fun is we got to get to look over the fence into somebody else's world, and hear about stuff that we maybe haven't personally experienced and that sort of thing. And so if you're more than about 45 years old, I'm sure you personally remember Phi Slama Jama-era and what was going on in that era. And if you're not, it was a pretty impressive run that went to the Final Four 3 times in a row, which is pretty historic. So just kind of bring us into your world. Just tell us some basketball here.
It's interesting. I mentioned 2 teammates, Eric Persky and Stuart Saunders over here. I was going to start off talking about how incredibly athletic I was and what an amazing athlete. And then they walked in. I thought, oh, okay, I can't say that. And then I say, well, maybe I'll convince them I became a great athlete in college. And I see Bill Worrell walk in, and I think, okay, can't go there. So Charlene Strickland's here and was my elementary school PE teacher. I was a great athlete in elementary school. I can go back down there. So I went to Memorial High School when I was being recruited. It's interesting. I guess the biggest part of my story is I had 2 choices to play college basketball. One of them was for the Sigma Chi's up at UT, and the other one was at University of Houston. And it was amazing because I remember Coach Lewis sitting in our house and talking, and it was about the time that Akeem had just gotten to the country, and there was a picture in the front page of him, hanging off the basket and just, unbelievable athletic specimen. And I remember asking Coach Lewis, I said, the guy from Africa, tell me about him. He goes, well, we think he's going to be pretty good. We think you would like to play with him. And so, it's interesting because those of you who are familiar with Memorial High School, if you were going to do a continuum of athleticism, if University of Houston is on this end of the continuum, sorry guys, Memorial High School is on this end of the continuum. Just not known for athleticism and speed and great athletes. And so here's Coach Lewis recruiting me, and I'm thinking, why? Why? I show up, and the very first practice is the most amazing display of basketball I've ever seen. Somebody comes in and shoots a layup, and if you picture the white square above the rim, it's 12 or 18 inches high. Somebody comes in and shoots a layup, and Akeem jumps up and pins the ball above the white square and pulls it down and throws a pass to Drexler, and Drexler's flying down the side and literally jumps over people. And he's got the ball back like this. Bam! And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, that's the most awesome thing I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, I never dunked the ball ever. I mean, not even close. Like, wouldn't even think about dunking. So I walk out there the first day of practice, and it's the most amazing collection of athletes I've ever seen in my life. So practice starts, and first drill, we're gonna go one-on-one and do something. And so I grabbed the ball, and I just went nuts. I just lost my mind. I suddenly started dribbling between my legs, and I was dribbling behind my back, and I was really gonna show them, I'm really something. I got some serious game, and I jump up, and I for some reason I try to dunk it, and I take the ball. And I stick it on the front of the rim, like, whap, like that. In momentum, I'm going so fast for me. My feet go flying out from under me, and I just sprawled out on the middle of the floor. First practice, people are like, who is this white kid? Who is this? And Coach Lewis stands up and he goes, Gettys, come here. He said, let me ask you a question. What is all that? Are you really athletic? I was like, yeah, yes, sir, I am. He said, okay, I want you to do me something. Do me a favor. I said, okay, you name it. He said, I'm going to call out a couple of guys, and I want you to run in and try to dunk on them. I was like, great, pick two. So he goes, Larry. So Larry Meeshaw, if you remember Larry, Mr. Mean, 6'9", 265, maybe 0.5 body fat. Just Mr. Mean, just a specimen. I mean, unbelievable, this guy. And then he goes, and Akeem. So if you haven't seen Akeem in person, he's this tall when you look at him. His shoulders are like this, and his arms are unbelievable. I mean, and so I backed up and said, you want me to go dunk on him, Coach? He goes, yeah. All right. I take off dribbling as fast as I can. I jump up. Larry doesn't even move. He just looks at me. Akeem doesn't jump, doesn't get on his toes. He goes like this, thwap, wham. So for the second time in my first 30 minutes of a college athlete, I'm sprawled out on the floor. By this time, the fellows are laughing and hooting and hollering, and I'm thinking, there goes my career. After practice, it's interesting because I learned a lesson that stuck with me my entire life. And I was sharing it with Tom. Coach Lewis called me into the office. I'm thinking, great, he wants my scholarship already. He's going to take my scholarship. So I sat down with Coach Lewis, and he said, let me ask you a question. I said, yes, sir. He said, I'm going to preface this by saying, I watched you play about 10 times in high school. I was like, oh. He's like, were you really athletic? I was like, no, sir, not at all. And he said, all that dribbling between your legs and all that dribbling behind your back, is that who you are? I was like, no, sir. He goes, well, let me ask you a question. If I gave you a scholarship and I'm going to put you together with these guys, why would you walk in here and try to be something different than who you are? And I said, Coach, I wasn't going to. I was going to be cool, and I walked in, and I was overwhelmed with the skill set and what everybody else could do and what I couldn't do. And he said, let's make a deal. I said, yes, sir. He said, how about you just be you? How about you do what you're good at, and then you trust me to put it together into a team? And that's profound, right? I mean, that is really profound, and it has stuck with me. I've told that story to junior high kids, high school kids. I used to think it's more applicable for youth, and then as I've gotten older, I've changed my mind. But it's stuck with me forever.
Yeah, I think most of us would like someone to grab us by the shoulders before we leave the house in the morning and say, "Go be you." Yeah. And that's right, and that's the good thing to do. And yeah, that'd be great. How powerful.
Well, it's interesting. You talked about the assists, and I was in high school. I was a shooter, and I was recruited to be a shooter. And so I was thinking, I'm joining this team, and I'm just going to do nothing but shoot. And about the first 4 or 5 games, I didn't get in. I didn't play at all. And for an athlete, that's unimaginable, not getting in the game. And I went out to dinner with my dad, who was incredibly wise, and he goes, let me ask you a question. He goes, how are you playing in practice? I said, I'm doing good, Dad. I mean, I'm holding my own. How are you shooting? I'm shooting really good. I mean, I'm knocking down shots. I'm playing really good. He goes, well, apparently that's not what he wants from you. And I thought about it, and I went, the definition of insanity, keep doing the same thing, you expect different results. He said, let me ask you a question. Is there something that nobody else on the team does? I thought, yeah, nobody passes. Nobody passes. And he's like, I have an idea. Why don't you try to become the best passer on the team? And so from that point forward, everything changed because there was a role that needed filling that fit my skill set. And I couldn't have played anywhere else. I couldn't have, there's not another college that I could have played at, but I could play there. And I could play with those guys that were some of the, 2 of the 50 greatest of all time because what I could do and trust Coach Lewis to put it together as a team.
That is so cool. I mean, the idea of the sort of the two hands that you had laid on you of Coach Lewis and your dad sort of shaping and directing you in that way. That's amazing. And it turned out pretty well with all those assist records still standing.
I tell people all the time, people make a big deal about the assist total. If you walk out on a basketball court and you could throw the ball and hit the backboard, somebody could go get it. It wasn't a great skill set when you're playing with Olajuwon and Drexler and Michal and Michael Young.
Well, so you mentioned Michal. You told me the other day about like some of the rec basketball during the summers and sort of the connection with those guys. You want to tell those guys that story?
You asked a question. Why did I think our team was special?
Yeah.
And I really think that what is similar to the story I just told. Coach Lewis did such a good job of encouraging us to improve, but also identifying a role and then having us accept the role and then excel at that role. And then if you take that mentality and you put it together when you're a part of something bigger than yourself and you don't care who gets the credit, well, then you can accomplish really, really great things. And so an example of that is I don't know if y'all remember, there was a recreation, it's still downtown, Memorial hits downtown, Fondy Rec Center. Fondy Rec Center was legendary. I mean, the basketball at Fondy Rec Center was unlike anything anywhere in the country. You'd walk in and this guy, Angelo, used to say whether you could play or not. And, Charles Barkley would have to sit out 2 games before it was his turn. It was Moses Malone. It was, all the Rockets. And Angelo was really a legendary figure, but he let the U of H guys play together. So we would be playing, all evening long for hours and hours against nothing but NBA players. And we're playing a game against Moses, and we're out on the floor. And this is the year Moses was MVP, and I can't remember the year, but he was the biggest, baddest dude on the planet. There was nobody bigger, tougher, meaner, than Moses Malone. So we're playing in this game, and he starts tweaking me. He keeps going, hey boy, get over here, boy. And I'm like, yeah. I'm thinking, I'm not playing that game, and I'm getting madder, and and we keep going and all of a sudden he does something, and I call a foul, and he goes, what'd you say, boy? I said, you travel, boy. And all of a sudden it's like, oh. And Moses just lost his ever-loving mind. I mean, he's coming at me, and he's running at me, and he pulls back his fist, and I'm thinking, uh-oh. I had enough time to realize I can run, and if I run, I can never come back. Or I can go fight Moses Malone, in the middle of Fondy Rec Center.
And never come back.
And never come back. That's right. And never come back. So I take off running at Moses, and I pull back my fist like I'm going to hit him, and I'm just thinking, dear Lord, how does this end? And at the last second, Larry Michal steps in between us. And I'm like jumping over Larry's back, like, I don't need you. I'm like, don't go, Larry, don't go. I tried to throw a punch at Moses over Larry's shoulder, and Larry goes, Mo, that's my teammate. You ain't touching Reid. And Moses is still mad, and Larry goes, bam, and hits him with a forearm, knocks Moses back. And I'm still like, oh, Larry, thank you. And Moses keeps coming, and Larry hits him again. He said, He said, that's my teammate. You ain't touching Reid. And Moses backed down, and long story, Moses and I became friends. But it was an example of roles, right? And Larry was the tough guy. And it wasn't just a tough guy, that was who he was. And so it was the matter of, Larry and I had known each other for a year, and yet he's willing to go toe-to-toe with the reigning NBA MVP to protect me because I've got a hot head and a big mouth, and I can't shut up. But that is a really cool story about rules.
I love that. Yeah, so good. So just give us, what's it like? I mean, most of us haven't been to the Final Four except maybe sitting in the stands or watching on TV. I mean, that's a pretty cool deal. You guys did it 3 years in a row. You know, you kind of give us a glimpse into the secret sauce of U of H there. But, you know, what's it like walking out and being a part of that whole world?
You know, it's amazing. It used to be when we didn't have TSA and all the security checks at airports. So the first one we went to in 81, 82, we ended up playing Michael Jordan and James Worthy in North Carolina. But as you stepped off the plane, the entire airport was a party. It was bands and, you know, fans. And from the time you stepped off the plane, there's an electricity in the air that's unlike any other sporting event. And we had the same experience in 82, 83 when we played NC State, and then the last year when we played Patrick Ewing and at Georgetown. But it is, if you get a chance, get tickets and go. And if you can't get tickets and go, for those of you who don't know, the Final Four is here this year. There's a tremendous number of events, cool events, you know, all around Discovery Green, and it's really it's a fun celebration.
Yeah, that is so cool. In fact, I'll just make a plug for it right now. There is an event that's called the Keys to Life Breakfast that goes on the Saturday morning of the Final Four weekend in the host city. And it's put on by a group called Athletes in Action. And we'll be helping you guys know more about it through our Toolbox network. But just know this, if you're a dad and you want something cool to do with your sons, it's a great thing. They give something called the John Wooden Award at that, and it's going to Scott Drew from Baylor this year. So he'll be down there. It's a whole cool thing. And so keep your eyes open for that. We'd love to help some of you get down and be a part of that. And then you can take part of some of the Final Four events.
It's a great event. There'll be all kinds of basketball coaches and basketball players, and it's a great thing to grab a neighbor, grab your kid, and go to one of these. I was with Athletes in Action and played with them for 6-7 years, and we started the breakfast as a Super Bowl breakfast with Joe Gibbs in San Diego, and it has grown into this magnificent production, and it's fun and it's entertaining and high energy, but it's a really cool event.
That's so cool. Okay, let's go back to the Final Four. So I'm gonna go to one of the tough moments. Okay, this isn't like a therapy session, so I don't want to take you flashback, but. You know, one of the things, and we talked about this before, but when 40 years ago, April 4th of this year, 4 years ago, so it's U of H in the finals against NC State. You guys are winning. And for those who weren't there, you want to tell us from your vantage point, firsthand perspective, what happens, and then take us into what you do with it from there.
So we were heavily favored after a Final Four game against Louisville that lots of people argue is still one of the greatest college basketball games of all time. So we're heavily favored. We're playing horrible basketball. We're just struggling to stay ahead. And then the game comes down to one last possession. We have the lead. Guy jumps up, shoots an air ball. Someone else grabs the air ball, dunks it, wins the game, national championship. And it's one of those stories, it's a Hollywood ending. It's like, it's too good to be true if you're from NC State. To be on the opposite side of that, it was the most gut-wrenching, as far as athletics goes. It's hard to imagine a bigger punch to the gut or a more crushing defeat than to be at the Final Four, to be heavily favored, to have millions and millions of people watching, and to earn the moniker of one of the best teams that never won it. Yeah. And it was devastating.
If you guys have ever seen the video clip of Jim Valvano running across the floor, hair on fire, arms up in the air, it's the end of that game. So Cinderella ending for them, but not so for you guys.
So that's an image that they'll play forever. I haven't seen it today, but the day's not over yet. It's still early. Sidney Lowe was the point guard for NC State, and I played 1 year in the CBA, and I was in the CBA playoffs And Sidney Lowe was my teammate. And so Sidney and I were in the same backcourt, and we're in some godforsaken place in South Dakota or somewhere, and we're waiting on a red-eye plane ride, and it's just Sidney and I sitting at a table, eating a burger, waiting for a plane, and there's a huge screen up, and they play that shot. And all I could think was, don't look at him, don't look at him, don't look. He reached into his bag and pulled out his national championship ring, and he was sitting, when I finally looked up at him, he's like this. Like, what are the chances, right? Sidney Lowe and I sitting at a table watching Jim Valvano act like an idiot.
Okay, so this is more than just about, taking you back into some kind of a painful moment. One of the things is most of our moments have not played out on national TV and, that kind of thing. But everybody has one of those moments where, it ends differently than we expected. So just tell us how you personally processed, maybe continue to, just take us into that. I mean, that's a moment. That's a moment for a man, what we do when it doesn't go the way we want it to go.
And it's interesting, Tom, the way it's impacted my teammates. I had one of the guys I played with, he and I were communicating earlier this week, and he's still talking about it like it just happened. And he put a statement in there, he goes, "We had such a tragic athletic career." Thought, tragic? Are you kidding me? We got to be a part of something that other than teams from UCLA, nobody got blessed to go to 3 Final Fours. And it's interesting because when we lost that game, I was already a Christian. I became a Christian through Young Life in high school. I had a personal relationship with Christ. I thought I had my priorities right, but that's a checkpoint, right? That's a flexion point where you go, okay, does my walk match my talk? And it's interesting because I remember everyone kind of went separate directions, and I was sitting in a staircase trying to process what had just happened after the moment. And I was overwhelmed by the fact that God had blessed me beyond measure to have been put in that position and to have had that opportunity. And it made me realize that if what you're putting your stock into, if what you're putting your time, if what you're putting your effort, your skills, your treasure, if it can't stand up to defeat, then you need to reevaluate. Right? It's the analogy that you put your ladder up against the wall, you climb the wall, and you get up there and you go, this isn't what I thought it was. And I realized that moment, it's interesting because I realized at the time, it's not going to define me. And it did the exact opposite. God used this incredible defeat. I mean, a defeat that they've made 2 movies about, right? 2 30 for 30s about. And God has used that moment to open doors for me my entire life, all the way up to 40 years later, sitting up getting to share with y'all the fact that the most important thing in your life is a relationship with Christ, something that can stand up to defeat, something that can't be defeated, right? And everything else, I challenge you to see if what you're putting your time and effort into, whether it can sustain that kind of loss.
Yeah, I want you to say it one more time. That's pretty powerful. That I don't know if I got it exactly right, but what we're putting our stock in, what we're counting on, it's got to be able to stand up to defeat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a teammate saying, how tragic. I'm like, tragic? Are you kidding me? That was the most enormous blessing any of us could have ever had, to have that opportunity and be put in that situation. And that's a guy that my heart breaks for him, that he's still reliving it, is still reliving the loss and the failure and the importance that it's had on his entire life. Here we are 40 years later and we're still, talking about it.
It's incredible. So one of the things that seems to be, and it kind of relates to that, and then So, you play at U of H, you have that great run, not tragic, and then you go out and you do the CBA for a while and some pro ball, and then you do athletes in action. And then eventually you move out of kind of athletics as what defines you. So, one of the other things I'm always interested in is the issue of identity, and I think you guys would probably agree that there's a tendency among us as men to take our identity as what we do. Yeah. And that's a little fragile because what we do goes up and down. So tell us about kind of moving into a new season of life and how that worked and how your faith plays into that.
It's interesting because when you and I were talking, and I've spent some time the last couple of days thinking about your identity and what forms your identity. And I guess the one thing that I've learned, and through basketball, one of the things I've learned is that God may be at work in your life and you don't know it. Because you don't know it, because you don't feel it, because you don't walk out and you don't feel puffed up and wind underneath your wings, you think, oh, God's not there and he's not working and he's not doing things. Or the opposite. You've prayed for something and you say, this is going to be my identity, and suddenly it's another failure. And you're like, well, wait a minute, that's not the way this is supposed to work. So I had two examples. I went back and coached with Clyde Drexler. Man, were we dysfunctional and not very successful, right, Bill? But it's interesting because Clyde prematurely retired. He didn't really want to be a college basketball coach, so he retired. And so here I am, 1 year out. I was up for a partner at a law firm. He called. He said, "Hey, let's go coach together." I'm like, "Are you nuts? Your body hurts and you don't want to get in shape again, and I'm not leaving my law firm." And after several conversations, he talks me into it, and so we do it. And then a year and a half into it, he's ready to quit. And I prayed about it, and I prayed before I left the law firm. And God clearly said, "Man, this is your chance to impact young men, and it's what you love, and go do this." And so, took a leap of faith, went and did it. And then Clyde leaves, and I'm thinking, what? That doesn't make sense, right? We were going to impact lives. We were going to change kids. And then suddenly, I'm one of the last two finalists for the job. I'm thinking,
to be the head coach then.
To be the head coach. And I'm like, man, we've got a big God. This is unbelievable that I went from a year and a half ago and didn't want to come and I was going to practice law. I'm going to be the head coach. Man, when I'm head coach of press conference, I'm going to talk about only God can do this and only God can put you in this place. And then I didn't get the job. And you want to talk about testing, right? Very publicly didn't get the job, And I had all the, well-intentioned Christian friends. Wow, what did God teach you through all that? And I'm like, I have no idea. I really, for years, I was like, I have no idea. I don't know what's going on. And then a couple of years later, my kid's a high school player at a small Christian school. They have a great team, and they're horrible. I mean, a great team, loaded with talent. They had, at that level of private school, you can really win games if you have 3 basketball players. They had 9, 6'9", 6'7", I mean, loaded with talent, and they were horrible. I mean, they were just getting killed. And the coach was abusive, and he was abusing them, and it was a horrible situation. And there was another dad that played college basketball, and we were like, man, this team should be really good. So the coach gets fired at Christmas time, and they didn't have a plan B. And so they called me and they said, hey, can you come by the school? I want to talk to you. I'm thinking, oh, great, my kid's gotten expelled. What has he done? And at the time, I'm working 2 jobs. I'm practicing litigation attorney at ExxonMobil, and it's the middle of basketball season, and I'm doing 25, 30 games for ESPN. And they tell me they fire the coach, and I'm like, that doesn't surprise me. What's plan B? They said, we don't have plan B, it's you. I said, what are your other options? And they said, well, we can cancel the season. I was like, well, that's not fair, right? And what's the one thing a guy with 2 jobs didn't need? A 3rd job? So I agreed to do it, and ESPN was really nice and let me out of a contract, and my wife was incredibly gracious. So we go on this journey together, and the team was so good, we ended up winning the state championship. So with 3 minutes to go, we're up by 25. My kid was a really good high school player, not good enough to play college, but a really good high school player. I get to take my kid out of the game, state championship, and wrap my arms around him. Man, I still get emotional. And I'm sitting there and tears running down my face and tears running down his face. And I said, God, this is what you were doing. This is why I'm not coaching at U of H. You were working and doing something I could have never imagined. Hey, gentlemen and Miss Strickland, there's not a greater athletic moment in my life than wrapping my arms around my kid. Wow. And I had no idea. I had no idea that's what God was doing.
That was so good. I was just having a conversation with a guy this morning. We were talking about viewing our current circumstances through the lenses of what God knows that I don't.
I have no idea. Yeah. So when I was cut from the NBA, it was funny. I had a long NBA career. I was drafted by the Bulls. I don't want to get too long-winded. I was drafted by the Bulls the year after Jordan. I got there on a Tuesday. I was cut on a Wednesday. But Tuesday, I was really good. And so I'm playing my hardest, and I'm trying to make this team. And as you can imagine, lifelong dreams. All I ever dreamed about was playing in the NBA. And this gentleman came down out of the crowd. He'd been sitting up there by himself. He was watching the tryouts of drafted and undrafted free agents. And he came up to me and he introduced himself. Arlie Nichols. He was the general manager and the head coach of Athletes in Action, the Christian ministry of Campus Crusade for Christ. And so Coach Nichols came up to me and he had his business card. And this is really funny. He handed it to me and he said, hey, when you get home, call me. Like, when I get home, I'm not going home. I'm making this team. He'd been watching all day and he said, hey, look, you're going to get cut in the morning. And when you get cut, call me. Sure enough, I got cut. I was on the plane, devastated, and felt in my pocket, and there's a card. I joined the team. It was an incredible ministry, unbelievable opportunity to impact young people. And I turned out to be an assistant coach, a player assistant coach. I'm in charge of recruiting. There's this kid out of Oklahoma who wants to join our team. Kid can't play dead in a war movie. I mean, can't play. But he's going to join our team. He's going to raise support. And he had this smoking hot fiance. Long story short, that smoking hot fiance has been my wife for 35 years. She made the team way before he made the team. And again, it was God saying, I know you want to be an NBA player. I know you've dreamed about it your whole life. I'm busy. I've got other things planned. And but for that, I would have never met Lisa.
We just can't miss that. I mean, I always look at a room like this and think, it would be horrifying, but it would be enlightening if all of a sudden we had a thought bubble pop up over every guy's head in the room, because there's tons of people in this room that we're just going through stuff going, it doesn't make sense. I hate it. I resent it. It's not what I expected. It's not going where I thought. But there's this, this story is a story of hope that runs underneath that through the dings, but there's still something purposeful and fruitful that's going on.
But we all love the verse Isaiah 40:31. Those that wait upon the Lord will mount up with wings of eagles. They will run and not grow weary, and they will walk and not faint. All of us love it when we have wings mounting up as wings of eagles, right? When we have air underneath our wings and we're soaring and everything's going great. Well, sometimes we're running and not growing weary. Right now, I can't. Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me right now. We're running and we're not growing weary. Well, the last part of that verse is sometimes you just need to walk and not faint. Just keep walking and trust and have faith in the days that the wind will come back. It'll get underneath your wing. But so often we come to events like this, and I always try to share with people, I've been through the last 12 months where I'm just trying to walk. I just want to walk and not faint. I just want to keep moving. And so often, I hear your speakers, and they're also so much more impressive. And you get the idea that, man, they've got their life together. It's been nothing but, a cakewalk. That's not reality. That's not life. And so I want to encourage you that, man, if you're in a season where you're just walking, it's okay. Just keep walking and don't faint.
Yeah, you're in good company. You're in the world of walkers right here. So that's really good. In fact, just again, not selling anything, but if you're in that place and there's any way that we Toolbox can help you walk without fainting, that is to keep going, to get you to some community, some encouragement. Reid's talked about a relationship with Jesus. You're scratching your head, wondering a little bit more about what that means. How do I get engaged in that, etc. That's what that little number is about. That we're not into putting on a show. We're into helping men find and take a next step that might be the right one. So we'd love to help you in that way. Yeah. Hey, let's do this before we have to wrap it up. Let's take a few questions from the crowd.
Sure.
All right. Anybody got a question for Reid? All right, right in the back there.
Hi, Reid. My name is Robert Young. I was a freshman at Texas when in 1983, and man, we were pulling for Phi Slama Jama-era. And today's game is a lot different than it was then. So my question for you, and Jim Valvano played this, the shot clock. Had there been a shot clock, y'all would have won.
Yeah, Eric and I were just talking about this. Eric Persky played at Arkansas, and Stuart Saunders, my high school teammates. We were just talking about how we think it needs to be down in the high school level. We think everybody needs to play with it. It would have benefited us. And it's ironic because at Memorial, we were a bunch of guys that we didn't want a shot clock, right? We wanted to pass, cut, pass, screen, pass. But the game has changed. And let me make a plug. If you haven't been following U of H this year, boy, you want to talk about a team that's easy to pull for. They've got a group of kids, high integrity, disciplined, polite, respectful. They've got a point guard out there that's maybe in 35 years of college basketball, Jamal Sheddy. He may be my favorite kid I've ever watched. His leadership skills and his ability. And listen, it's a program, the city, you don't have to go into U of H. You can be a UT grad and get on board, because I'm telling you, you talk about a team, they're not going to embarrass you off the court and on the court. What a product. I'm telling you, I could not be more excited about U of H basketball.
That's awesome. Another question? Yeah, right back there. Go, Pat.
Are you going to be calling the game tonight, Reid?
No, I appreciate it. So I've done games on ESPN for about 33 years. By the way, highlight of my career, I got to call a Rockets game with Bill Worrell. And it was a blast. I mean, except I think I kept saying, yes, sir, Mr. Worrell. Yes, sir. Yeah, that was good. Yes, sir. I got to call games for 35 years. It's been an enormous blessing. The travel got to be a lot, and so I backed off. I did every year of the Big 12 since its inception. And about 3 years ago, I backed off. I did the Longhorn Network, ironically. For about 15 years, and now I just do a handful of U of H games and love it. Nothing's better than put in a full day of work, drive over, see a great basketball game, and then leave, and then get home.
Good, right here.
Can you name a player that inspired you?
A player that inspired you.
It's a great question. And I just talked about Jamal Shed. You ought to Google this young man. There was a game earlier last year. And it had a horrible ending, probably an injustice, argument over a goaltending call. And as U of H in Tuscaloosa, as the team was leaving the court, assistant coach frustrated, kicks a garbage can, makes a scene that was embarrassing, trash everywhere. In the midst of all of this chaos and frustration, this young man stops. He's leaving the floor. He played 40 minutes, and he starts picking up the trash. And he puts it in the trash can, and he picks it up, and he sets it up, and I was blown away. And they asked him, and they said, Jamal, what was up with that? He goes, that's not who we are. That doesn't represent us. And he said, when we leave this arena, I want to have left an accurate representation of who we are. And from that, he has the most innate leadership skills I've ever seen. The kid is an absolute star. He has a chance to break my record. I hope he does. If he'd have played with the guys I played with, instead of 700, the record would be 1,200. And he's played with some good players. But I told him the other day, I said, nothing would give me greater joy than to stand out on mid-court and hand him the ball with the record, because he's really a great young man.
That's really cool. All right, get maybe one more, maybe 2 more. Yeah, right here, Dave.
So, how do you feel about name, image, license, transfer portal, and people just going to the NBA early? There's no real affinity or attachment to the university.
Yeah, kid at Kentucky, player.
He asked about transfer portal and stuff like that, and you couldn't hear the question.
Yeah, name, image, and likeness. College kids can now make money. There's a college kid at Kentucky who's making between $3 and $4 million, has a deal with a Porsche dealership, and it's like, holy cow. Arkansas used to do that, but it was all under the table. It's interesting because the problem is the NCAA has abdicated leadership, and so there's a void, and anytime there's a vacuum, it's going to be filled. Somebody's going to fill it, and it is stupid what's going on. And then the legal ramifications of kids that sign NILs and they go and then they transfer, and what happens with that contractual obligation, it's unbelievable. Now, U of H has got a young man in charge of their NIL, Gosling. What is it? Yeah, Landon Gosling. And he's done a terrific job in Mattress Mac, and they've got a nice war chest, and they're doing it the right way. It's not just all these one-off deals, but man, has it changed?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Well, I'll tell you what, we always have a pact that we start and end on time, so we're going to wrap it up there. But will you guys just join me in giving a huge thanks to Reid?